Welcome. Thought we had the man himself there.
Yeah.
I was going to launch out with the joke that I'm Peter Rowe, and welcome to the podcast. Peter Rowe was right here. We've just missed him. He's disappeared. Now, look, for those of you tuning in, thank you for your patience. We're a little bit behind, running a little bit late, but we've had a few technical issues. So that's why our fearless leader, the host of this podcast, is not currently with us, but he is joining us. He's coming very, very soon. And we will be talking about a specific topic, but he doesn't want to miss out. So we don't want to get going on that topic just yet until he makes it here. But in the meantime, we do have something to chat about. And that is a little event that's happened with one of our fearless co-hosts, Jace. And he's going to explain what's been going on in his neck of the woods, and we can chat about that a little bit further. So, Jace, kick it off. Let us know what's happening.
Thank you, mate. Thank you, Luke. Hello, guys. Pete will be here soon enough. So, in the meantime, although I suspect that Pete would have much to say about this as well, as many of you would know, I'm probably the exception to the group in that I'm down in Albany, which is in the bottom left southern corner of Western Australia. Probably a good 400 kilometres away from Perth, which is where the rest of you guys are. As a result of that, I'm in a large country town, which tends to be a little different to a more cosmopolitan metro centre. The values down here are perhaps a little different. And I didn't really appreciate that over the last 3 years until an event happened yesterday. And it really surprised me, infuriated me, and frankly scared the socks off me. It was the first time I've actually seen something that I thought was purely a historical event. A group of people lobbying hard to have books banned. Sure, some very specific types of books that certain types of people might find offensive and certainly wouldn't want their children to read. But nonetheless, these were books that have been approved by the State Library System of WA and were available on the shelves for young people to be able to read. Now, they're books about sex education. Parents have different perspectives on this. And some parents don't want their kids to read that kind of material. They would prefer to teach it themselves or perhaps ignore the subject altogether. But then there's parents like me who believe that their kids need to be taught from a very, very early age everything, so that there's no misinformation, there's no ignorance, there's no information coming from their peers, which is loaded and perhaps incorrect. I find it incredibly important that kids know what's going on. It's the best way to stop them being groomed. It's the best way to stop them being abused. And it's the best way to stop them being in a situation where they might have to do something that they really didn't know that they didn't want to do until it's too late. The reason I'm phrasing it like this is because the books do contain some content that many people would find offensive. I'm going to mention the word that most people have found offensive purely because it puts it in context of why this argument is happening in the first place. The book contains information about fisting. Now, that is something that I think for most ordinary human beings would rarely enter their consciousness. But for some human beings, that's a part of their ordinary, everyday sexual experience. But what I want to make sure of is that my daughters know what that is before they find themselves in a situation with a forceful partner who decides that that's what they want to do, and they don't know what is going on until it's too late. Education, knowledge means everything. Now, if you're the sort of parent that thinks that your child is so innocent that they don't need to know anything about that, that's fine. That is your position as a parent, and I respect that entirely. But what I'm asking in regards to these sorts of books is that they're not banned, and that you as a parent your child. You as a parent look at the library and say, this is a place of knowledge, and it's not a babysitter. That those books should not be banned, that those books should be accessible to those that want them under supervision. Yes, they should not be in the junior section, they should be in the young adult section, but nonetheless, even there, they should be treated in such a way that a parent has the decision, that has the right to make the decision as to what that child can read. My argument is I, as a parent, want my child to be knowledgeable and educated. There are some parents that don't want that. Both parties are right. They have the right to bring up their children as they please. But I'm asking that I have the right to parent as I see fit, and that they have the right to parent as they see fit. By banning a book, you're denying me the ability to parent how I see fit. By leaving the book there, I'm allowing you to parent how you see fit. If you don't want your child to go there and read that, then don't let them. So that's just one element of the discussion that happened at Albany Council last night. The other element, which I'm sure Pete has something to say about as well, was in regards to an event that was sponsored by the council that occurred down here. And there's a debate, and I'm yet to see some definitive information one way or the other. It was an event where they taught twerking. Now, we all know that what that style of dancing is, and there's perspectives on it, and it is notionally a sexualized kind of dance. I've got a position on this, which I'm not going to go into, but suffice to say, this particular group that also wanted the books banned also has a very, very big problem with the fact that they believe that underage people were also allowed to come along to this tutelage, I don't know what you want to call it, this teaching of how to do twerking. I'm pretty sure that it didn't involve wearing bikinis, but nonetheless, some parents would still prefer that their children weren't involved in this kind of thing. As I understand it since, apparently the advertisement did include age restrictions, but I also understand there's arguments saying the initial advertisements did not. So we've got two separate arguments here. More importantly, my position on all of this is that I feel it is a thinly veiled attack on the LGBTQI community down here in Albany. Now, for me, I have no monkeys in this circus. I am not part of that community. It's not my thing. But I fully support groups that are being condemned or criticized when especially I feel it's out of line. You know, these are people who are already in a situation where life is difficult. And to have people that are out there saying God hates you or the equivalent thereof, purely because of the way that you were born, for me, is a significant issue. I'll stop dominating the floor now. You guys are free to ask questions about anything that I have represented or perhaps even misrepresented, by all means. But you know, it's an argument I think that needs to be held because, as I understand it, and perhaps it's a misreading of history, book burning, book banning, anti-academia, anti-intellectualism, anti-science is where Nazi Germany began.
Yep. Look, just going to jump in and just say hi, guys. Sorry about tonight. I've had more technical difficulties with my phone and couldn't overcome this particular issue tonight, in spite of me having a brilliant son who is a tech head. I could be seen on my phone, but I was in slow motion the whole time. Most people probably wouldn't have even noticed, to be honest. But I didn't think it was at all suitable. So I'm using the old cam on my Mac, which is why I look more like a ghost than I normally do. So apologies to everyone viewing, and Suresh, Jace, Luke, and Rich. Thank you for holding the fort for me. Crazy, yeah. And look, in regarding to what Jace was just talking about, we spoke via Messenger during the week about the situation in Albany. This happened, of course, in Perth at the State Library, I think, probably 2 years ago now. And it's taken that long for all the freaks to get down to Albany to have their part of the whole thing. And look, there are mixed comments about it. Certainly there was in Perth and there is in Albany. I had an interesting talk to my wife, who most of you, of course, will know, Lou, and I mentioned the discussion with Jason, a couple of guys, about the complaints from a fundamentalist group in Albany about twerking in particular. She had a very good point, because I said, I think it's something that adults kind of generally indulge in, and children are, perhaps not suited to it. And then she said, yeah, they said the same thing about the twist when it came out. It was
It's
disgusting.
absolutely
It was
true.
depraved. It was, you know, what Elvis did with his hips was just
Yes.
absolutely, you know,
Horrific.
unbelievable. So that doesn't necessarily say that should mean that all dances or all movements should be, you know, tarred by the same brush. I think twerking is very different. And in fact, I saw a drag queen last night. I was looking up information on trying to find out what the census was on this. And this drag queen said that, you know, I've been a drag queen for 20 years. I would not let any children near twerking whatsoever, because they see the kind of depraved side of it, if you like, in nightclubs and shows and stuff like that. And yes, whilst it might seem that the child is just doing something innocent, I guess there are other issues involved in it. But it's really, really hard to have a definitive statement about it. The simple matter that Jason and I, and I'm sure we all agree on, if you as a parent don't want your child to do it, guess what? Don't. If those parents want to do it, regardless of whether you think it's irresponsible or whatever, that is their business. And it is not the business of fundamentalist Christian people to line up and start bashing other people who do something that they don't like. People like that have prevented stem cell research and suicide-assisted dying in this country for too long. And that's the kind of thing that happens when they get power hungry and they think they have the right to tell people what to do. So
Can
yeah.
I just add something?
Yeah,
to
go
just,
through it.
what you guys have been talking about there as well. The Cumberland City Council in Sydney went through this exercise on the 1st of May this year, where they went to banning a whole lot of books because some of those books talked about same-sex relationships. And the point I was making to the guys earlier before you came on board, Pete, was that in that case, it wasn't led by fundamentalist Christians. It was actually led by fundamentalist Muslims.
Right.
There's a significant Muslim population in that area, and they were the ones who wanted that ban on those books. Now, we went through a similar exercise. So it is fundamentalism, but let's not label the Christians as being the perpetrators in that particular case, because it wasn't the Christians who were opposed to it.
Sure.
It was actually fundamentalist Muslims. But we went through a similar exercise back a couple of years ago when we had the same-sex debate going on, a same-sex marriage debate going on in Parliament. And one of the things that I wanted to do as president of the Ethnic Communities Council here was to be the first culturally and linguistically diverse community group that was going to support same-sex marriages anywhere in Australia. And so I took it to my management committee to say, we're a human rights organization. We talk about the human rights of people from non-English speaking backgrounds, etc. I'd like us to be the first community group anywhere in Australia that actually comes out with a statement supporting the same-sex marriage bill. And I knew I was going to be divided largely on fundamentalist, non-Christian religious groups on my board. And so what I decided to do was to put three propositions that we could put forward. One was to support the bill, which would support our human rights perspective. To abstain from the vote, which then meant that you weren't going to be impacting on your human rights perspective, or vote no. And I knew that those people who were fundamentalist non-Christians, if you like, the other groups, who were going to oppose it, but also still wanted to preserve the human rights aspects of it, would abstain. And out of my 14 board members, I got 7 of them to abstain. So I didn't need to get very many votes to get across the line. And all I needed was 4. I managed to get the 4 yeses, and that's all I needed. And we became the first organization to vote.
But that's precisely the point, isn't it, Suresh? In a secular country, religious groups should not be the arbiters of morality and ethics.
Yep, absolutely. look, and you look, it took a bit of maneuvering on my part to get us to that position, but we were the only CALD organization that actually set out and had a position on it. All the others chose to not have a position and leave it up to each individual to make their own decisions. I just felt that on a human rights basis, we had no choice but to make that position. So, but yeah, you're right there. It comes back to that point that you were making earlier, that why is it, if you don't want to be, if you don't want to be a part of that twerking scene, don't go. Stay away from it.
Look, it's seemingly a very simple solution, isn't it, to keep people minding their own business, and people love. And look, I was guilty as a Christian man for all those years. I absolutely would make sure I had my 2 bobs worth and make judgment about those people who didn't share the view. Thankfully, I think and Rich and Luke are great examples of how some people have actually evolved and developed, and not being left back in the the Pentecostal days of shouting at people and putting them down and making them feel absolute rubbish. But officially welcome everyone to this 34th episode of An Atheist, a Believer, and a Pastor Walk into a Bar. I don't know what you've done so far, so if I'm doubling up on information, guys, I do apologize. Great to have your company on this 28th day of August 2024 too. It has just gone 8 o'clock. In fact, it's 8:45 right here in Perth in Australia Western Standard Time. But please be involved. I notice a little comment section to the side of our screen is at the moment empty, which is quite unusual for this time of night. But I obviously think a lot of people probably dropped off when they realised that we had dropped off. But we are here. Love you to be a part of it tonight. If you've got a comment or a question, particularly about the main thing we want to talk about tonight, which is, and I came across, I mentioned it last week, Luke and Suresh weren't here, but Jason, Rich, and I talked about the podcast after we finished with Dave Templeman last week about he had to go and pick up his son. So we chatted among ourselves about one of the things that I thought of, which really struck me during the week, and this whole idea about a creator kind of really blew me away, because I hadn't really separated God and creator. I saw God as the creator. And then I thought, hang on a minute. What if there's just a creator? Why does we have to plug God into the whole thing? I'm quite happy with considering the possibility of there might be a creator. It would explain lots of things. We have no way of knowing, of course, the same way at the moment we have no way of knowing whether God is real. But then I thought, if you think about the idea that there was a creator, and then people back in the day, of course, started creating gods, filling in all of the information that we didn't have, gods for everything. And then pretty much, after a couple of thousand years, the whole idea of a creator was kind of put on the back burner as far as I can see, and the whole thing became about God or gods. And then what I'd like to do tonight, because the theme of tonight is believing in a creator easier than believing in a God? To which my answer is yes, because it kind of strips away all of the stuff that human beings have put on the possibility of there being a creator, and have made the switch saying, well, we're going to adopt the idea of a creator, but we're going to call it God. And we're going to suggest that God can do this and God can do that, and he can't do this and he can't do that. So we've created this whole situation. I thought it'd be fascinating tonight to just try and forget for a minute that there is a God, that there is a Bible, that there is a Quran, that there is, lots of books written about religion, and just see what we can come up with, and thinking, what would the world be like if we just accepted that there was a creator, and here we are. That's simple. I want to break it right down to, yes, we believe God doesn't exist anymore. It didn't happen. There's no Bible. There's nothing. There's just us on this earth, and we think there's a creator. And what that means, I could quite easily imagine there being a creator, and not having to put all the stuff that goes with it, so that we can identify the power of the creator that makes our lives easier by explaining how things are working. So I'm not sure where this could go. It could fall flat on its face, but I found it fascinating. I can believe there is a creator. I've got no way of proving it, so I'll have to believe in that the same as I did believe in God. But do you know what I mean? Without all of the baggage. So I just wanted to chuck it open and just see what the whole idea for you guys of just there being a creator differs from the idea there being a God, or is there no difference?
Can I add to that, Pete? In Hinduism, we also have a god who is a destroyer. Okay, so
Right.
Shiva is the destroyer, and he's the god of storms and destruction, who is fear-inducing but benevolent at the same time. He destroys those things that are no longer needed. So he's the god who he destroys everything that's become old and is no longer required anymore. So not only is there a creator in Hinduism, there is a destroyer.
Right.
It's quite fascinating. It's quite different to anything Christian, I'd imagine. I don't think there's any equivalent in Christianity at all, is there?
Well,
like
I don't think
holy
there's been a God that fits in with that anywhere, right? Through Greek gods and wow, that's so. Is this a new addition to the Hindu belief, or is this as far back as you can
It's
remember?
and just reading there, Shiva is always is known in the Vedas as Rudra, the destroyer of evildoers, the god of storms and destruction, who is fear-inducing but benevolent, and is a god who destroys everything that has become old and is no longer needed. So destruction is essential for creation. So he has so it's quite a fascinating concept, because of course don't we don't believe in Hindus don't believe in the end of life, because there's a reincarnation. So there's a destruction at the time of your finishing your first uh, passage of life, and then going on to the new one. So there's a creation and a destruction. There's a cycle.
How do you
We,
find out who's left on the list?
yeah, just do something bad. You go to the top of the list. You're
I mean,
due for
I'm assuming
crossover as well,
eventually he's going to run out of things to destroy. I mean, surely, or
yeah,
is it just the concept that the world never gets to the point where it's that good?
It's
yeah,
cyclical, isn't it? It's cyclical.
Yes.
It's a representation of life and death.
The god Kali, or Kalika, is also about death and violence and
yeah, and that destroyer god comes in many forms: Shiva, Rudra, Kali, and so on. Yeah. Different parts of India will believe in different parts of different people or manifestations of that destroyer god.
right.
And there are people who pray to the destroyer god.
Really?
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. You'll go into there are Shiva temples, as there are Kali temples, and so on. So I suspect that part of that prayer to those Shiva temples and the Shiva gods and so on are to ward off that destroyer. To appease the destroyer, to make them feel like they're loved, and therefore do not come and manifest your destruction on us, my family, etc.
Either that
Does
or they're all
praying
full of
work the same way?
narcissists.
Sorry, Suresh, does praying work the same way in Hinduism that it does in Christianity? Like, is it the whole?
Yes, but we don't have. And let me generalize terribly here. My understanding of a lot of prayer is the issue of penance and punishment, and needing to feel like we need to be in some form of purgatory for having committed sin. Hinduism, on the other hand, focuses very much on the doing of good, and the good that comes from the doing of good. So it's not about what you did bad. You did something bad, yeah, you're going to come back in a lower form. But there's no punishment, which I see as the essential difference between the Eastern religions and the Christian faith, which tends to be and I emphasize that I'm coming from this from without the lived experience of being a Christian, but having been to schools that teach that. But it's all about and to me that focus on needing to absolve yourself from sin and having that original sin always with us. Just to me is just focusing so much on the negatives when I'd much rather focus on let's do the right thing by everybody else in the community. Let's help everyone. Let's do, and yeah, that I see is the difference between the, and which is why Hinduism became very attractive in the 60s and 70s to a lot of the Western folk who came to India looking for that in addition to the drugs. But yeah.
I don't know what you're suggesting. Before we move on to Luke and Rich, there's a couple of notes coming in from the. It's hard. This is the name we had trouble with before. I'm not sure whether we asked for an English pronunciation for us ignoramuses, but is it Elbaji or something similar to that? Anyone work that out? It's clearly not Indian. It's
I mean, let me have a look at the comments.
Albagogi.
Oh.
Albagogi.
What is it? Sorry.
Yeah. So look, he's making the point that he or she's making the point that they pray to the destroyer god so that Shiva will have mercy on them, which is pretty much what I was. To ward off.
And then Atman is Brahman, the universe as a mind. And then they pray to the destroyer gods that Shiva will have mercy on them. And good old Fenton, well done, mate. Thanks for coming back again. Spoke to Fenton a lot last week. Back with us again. CTMU is hogwash.
What is CTMU?
Well, I'm assuming that's the cognitive theory model for the universe.
Okay.
I think that's what CTMU says. He says it's hogwash. It is a theory crafted to make the inventor money and not to aid in knowledge. He is seen as a quack and has been for a long time, followed up with any time a physicist or mathematician creates a theory of everything, we can know they are full of it and selling a product. That's a big statement from a tiler. For those who don't know, Fenton is a tiler in California. So who said tilers aren't decent people?
He puts the pieces together.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. What he needs is the grout guy, though. That's what they.
Grout guy.
That's it. In case you're wondering, Fenton is one of the probably the most hideous radio advertisements ever, which has now moved its tentacles to television, talking about the grout guy, and it's. Look, the first time I heard it, I nearly drove off the road. It was so bad, but it kind of grows on me. It's a song about the grout guy, which no doubt are either the grout guy yourself, or you have a partner who's a grout guy. But either way, those tiles need to be grouted beautifully, or move to Bali and you don't have to worry about grout. They don't bother. They just bung the tiles together, and there you go. And it works good for me. So, Luke, what could the world look like if God didn't exist and you just decided you believed in a creator? What would that kind of look like to you?
I think we're playing with the semantics of language that it's not even really. It's kind of, for me, is the equivalent of saying, what if we had a radio host and not a presenter? And you go, well, they're just two words for the same thing. It's God is just the language that we use. But in saying that, I'm being a little bit funny and kind of picking this apart. I know that the intent is not about the name. I know that really what we're talking about is the baggage that we attribute to this. But to be honest, I agree. There's a lot of baggage that we've hung on the Creator in trying to get our heads around what is. I mean, there's always, if there is a Creator, there are going to be humans trying to figure out that Creator. That's in my experience, my understanding. Anthropologically, it's always happened, and I think it always will happen, because the second that we think that there is something we don't fully understand that has brought everything into being, the idea that whatever it is that has done that, this Creator, the idea that Creator would bring everything into being, ultimately for no purpose, simply to be hands off and to just go, cool, I did that, and now I'm disappearing, it's a very hard pill to swallow. That may be the case. I don't believe that's the case, but anything's possible. If that is the case, that would be a very, very sad reality. In fact, I would much rather it be an accident and there not be a Creator than that be the actual answer. So I think because we find that so difficult to comprehend, because it really removes all meaning and all purpose for there being a creation. When it's an accident, there doesn't have to be a meaning or a purpose. We can create our own, and that's that. But once you introduce a Creator, it becomes harder, right? So for me, I believe, I think we can't separate the two, but what we certainly can do is recognize the baggage. And I can't speak for Rich, although I think I can. I know him pretty well, but I think a big part of what the two of us have done with our faith and with the work that we do in communicating it is about identifying the baggage that we have, not us, but the church has put on the name of God, and really try to get back to the source and say, well, what's healthy and what's not, because it's all well and good to try and figure something out. That's not a bad thing, but once we start trying to manufacture this idea of God into our own projections, that's when it becomes an issue. And humanity has always done that. That's why there's been so many gods. And you look at all the gods are violent, incredibly violent. And I mean, I don't know about all of the religions in detail, but so I don't know if there is a specific destroyer god in other religions. So Hinduism may be unique in that sense of having a dedicated God, although there are 300 million gods in Hinduism. So
yes,
it makes sense that there is going to be a dedicated God to that. But the idea of a God as a destroyer, either creator and destroyer, is synonymous with almost all the gods. Violence is inherent in the gods, because most of the gods, or all of the gods, bar the one true God, which I believe, are projections of humanity's violence. And that's why you see that all throughout history. And
Wouldn't you not agree? Sorry, go on.
No, that's it.
I was going to say, would you not agree that describes the God of the Old Testament as a destroyer, ethnic cleansing?
Right, absolutely. You see it all through the Bible.
Good. I was worrying that you were going to give him a pass. That's all. That's good.
Listen to me. I give God a pass because I do not believe God is like that. But the Bible is riddled with stories of God like that. However, God didn't write the Bible. We've got human beings writing the Bible.
True.
We have human beings in a certain time frame and with certain views of the world, and they understood God. In saying that, there's some incredibly unique parts of the Bible that we see a different perspective. We see a subtle shift, a bit of a subversive thing that is almost unintentional, and there is certainly a progression of removing that element, which I believe is culminated in Jesus revealing God as non-violent, as non-sacrificial, which is a huge thing. That changes everything, because that's not what God is supposed to be like. For me, that's the difference. But there's no getting around. There is no getting around the violence of God in the Bible, which is why a literal reading of the Bible is not a good idea,
So many of the stories in the Old Testament are basically complete lists of things like Anubis, Hades, even Morrigan, the Celtic god of destruction. There are so many other stories that we find rewritten into the Bible, which is why I very often question the veracity of the Bible itself. And I know you place a lot of faith in it. Of course you do. And I get that. These parallels, they say a lot to me. I mean, even Osiris and not Anubis, Thanatos, these are all stories from way before the Bible, and yet they're replayed in the Bible.
But that's the beauty of it. See, if we approach the Bible as saying the value and the worth of this document is it's presenting something new. That is what is making this thing trustworthy. Then we discover we discover like the what do you call it? What was the Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that, or we have major discoveries in ancient Near East, and we say, oh, hang on a minute, see this flood story? Yeah, we've found these stories about the Atrahasis epic, and they're about 1,000 years prior to this, and it's about a flood story with a guy on a boat and all this sort of stuff. And you go, oh, what do we do with that? And then we find creation stories that are similar but different. And we find all these different things, and we go, what's going on here? The beauty of it is when you see the subversive nature of it, of taking a story that existed and saying, this is the current understanding, but this is what we think God is like. And it changes the whole meaning of it. So that, for me, doesn't take away the veracity of the Bible. It just changes how we are supposed to view it. If this is a group of people trying to establish an identity to themselves, coming out of Babylon, for example, surrounded by Babylonian myths, well, it makes sense that they would take some of those Babylonian myths, those understandings of the world, yet they would put their own spin on it to say, actually, this is what God is like. Does it get the full picture? No. They still think God flooded the world. There's no way God flooded the world. That is a horrific thing to believe. But at least it was a little bit more progressive than the Atrahasis epic. So it's like this moving of the story forward that I see that is really beautiful. So yes, that's it's a very long way of answering that question, Rowie, but that's sort of where I'm at.
Well, just before we move on to Rich, I just want to backtrack a little bit on what you said. And I find it very difficult. I find it very easy, as I said, to separate the idea of a God and a creator. To me, they're not one and the same, because the creator was first, if there is such a thing. And you mentioned all about the baggage. Every single solitary piece of baggage that is associated with God now was put there by people. The creator in its raw form was nothing. It was just a belief that there could be something in the sky. So every single thing that it is, including its name and what God was capable of doing, everything, the religion that sprung from it, everything, blessings, healings, all the baggage was just put there, uninvited, if you like, by people. And yet here we are in 2024 saying that, yes, there's all of this baggage, it's not helpful. It didn't need to be that way, but it is. But it's still possible to strip away all of that baggage and just say, let's just have a look and see if there is just a creator. Just call the creator or creators. It could be plural.
But there's baggage in any relationship, is how I see it. So if we understand, and look, God is not a man, God is not a woman, God is non-binary, if that's the way you want to think about it. There is no gender. Gender does not exist in the idea of God, right? But yeah, I'll use the him sort of language, right? The father, child, but that's not, you guys understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, it's all good.
For me, I go, is it easier to remove all the baggage and have God as a concept where we go, at least we know God created something and that's that, and we can just leave it at that because everything else goes to shit? Is that easier? Absolutely. Does that get rid of the baggage? Absolutely. But for me, for my children, like, I'm a very flawed individual. Daily, I struggle with all sorts of stuff, and it's like, I'm not a perfect dad. I'm not a perfect husband. I'm not, I get some stuff right. I get a lot of stuff wrong. And I just go, it would be much easier for my kids to remove all the baggage and just say, that is my father and he created me and that's that. And it's like to then remove themselves. But that removes all richness of any form of relationship, right and wrong. And I can't fathom that in the same way that I can't fathom having a creator as a concept, but not being in some sort of relationship. And I don't have to fully understand the intricacies of God. The minute I understand God, it's not God, because God is transcendent. We cannot ever possibly fully understand God. But I kind of want to, I want to understand, at least, is this a good God or not a good God? Is this a violent God or is this a non-violent God? Is this is this a God of love or is this a God of hate and pain and retribution? And does God care about people? Does God not care about people? These are some things that I really want to know, because I want to know whether I want to be in a relationship with that kind of God or not. But I don't need to know how God does certain things or how prayer works or doesn't work. None of that. I don't really care about that. But there's the core things I do, and I think it's the same for me with my kids. So I don't know. I get it. It's cleaner. It's neater to just detach, but we lose something if we do that, in my opinion.
Rich?
Yeah, no, I find that interesting as well. When I think about this, there's a couple of ways that I look at it. There's, when we talk about God and all the baggage that comes with it, I think to start talking about that, you need to buy into one crucial thing, which is that this thing we put the word God on has somehow communicated with us. If they have communicated with us, and then we've got this whole conversation that will lead into like religious conversations. So Christianity, this God somehow communicated us, that leads towards Jesus, and we have this whole conversation. But you've got to buy into that crucial piece, which is God speaks, and he spoke in this way, in this point in history. And then you start having that Christian conversation. If you don't, you might go have a Muslim conversation because you actually center it right in the prophet, or Hindu. There's a cultural, scriptural piece that has evolved in the East there, and those sorts of things. So, but if you say, okay, let's not talk about the God who speaks into particular cultural, religious expressions. Let's talk about before that. And I find that actually fascinating, because then we're talking about the evidence of the lived experience, the evidence of logic, the evidence of, if we think the world is this way or physics works this way, it has implications about beginnings and creator without the baggage. So there's this whole sort of what I want to call pre-religious conversation about creator. Might be interesting. Even creator presumes something about this entity in a certain mode. But yeah, I find it fascinating, Robbie. And as you know, I actually do buy into the whole idea that this thing actually communicated ultimately in the person of Jesus Christ. So I do have that Christian conversation. But before it, I think that's fascinating, because, the whole thing about where the universe came from, is it this cyclical over and over sort of thing without a beginning? Then you go, okay, well, we don't need to look for a point in time beginning. But there's some very strong arguments that point towards the universe having some kind of initial moment. And if there is some kind of initial moment, unless you want to commit intellectual suicide, you have to posit a something that set it all going, a creator of sorts. You can't have it both ways. If the universe had a beginning, something had to start.
Conscious creator.
It's logically incoherent to have any other view. However, a cyclical universe that has no beginning, you get away with it, and I think there's a lot of there. But then you start talking about the logical need for something to begin. I think I think in the way that I think about philosophy and logic, being that there is, that we can have a conversation, means that something has to be the source of it. So there's that kind of discussion is fascinating and far freer from the baggage that comes with the religious conversations, which is all about, it gets laden with morality and responsibility and things like that. So it's a fascinating conversation.
That's why for me, Rich, as an atheist, I can indulge in the fantasy and the thought of a creator, whereas I can't, because there's nothing to disbelieve. There's nothing to believe. It's a concept and an idea, which God was in the very beginning. But to me, it's not that a God can't be a creator. It's just there's so much crap and stuff. So it's linked in. It's got tentacles everywhere into religion and corruption and lack of proof. All of this stuff just makes God as an entity to believe in incredibly difficult. You've really got to have a commitment of belief to be able to buy all of the stuff that goes with a God. Whereas if you just talk about a creator, that you can then incorporate evolution, which a lot of Christians still don't believe. I know you guys are cool with it, but a lot still aren't. Can't get past that. You can actually incorporate all of the amazing things that have been put forward as an idea of a creator that almost seems like religion has just grabbed hold of it and sort of held it close and saying, this is our creator's God. There's no creator without God, and that's our God, and we created God, and it just turns into as you mentioned, a cyclical mess to me. This kind of gives me, when I thought about this, I kind of thought, hang on a minute, I can actually consider the fact that it might be a creator. I'm not going to do anything with it because I can't prove that it exists, and so there's nothing there, but it allows me to be able to feel good about the possibility of that answers a lot of questions. If you're not a God believer and you're an atheist, then what is there left? There's nothing. Hey?
I still struggle with the idea. I mean, and I know Rich and I had this interaction probably a good 2 months ago now, where, and I know Rich is going to take umbrage to this straight away, and I fully understand that. I fully expect him to come straight back at me. That when he says it's intellectual suicide, that kind of makes me stop and go, well, hang on a second. From my perspective, on the outside, looking in, right, looking at people with faith and with belief, I really struggle with this idea that you go, look, I don't understand something. I don't understand how it all started. So therefore, invisible sky wizard. That just doesn't work for me. It's kind of like it's anthropomorphism. I don't ascribe a conscious decision to the beginning of the universe. It doesn't need to be that way. It could be that way. I'm not denying that. But from my perspective, if we go with the old Occam's razor, the simplest answer is normally the right one. From my perspective as a non-believer, I don't understand why we can't have a singularity that exploded and suddenly everything created. I don't understand why we have to ascribe an intent to that.
No, see, Jace, I actually 100% agree with what you're saying. Because I'm now speaking in this pre-religious space, this mode. What I'm saying is, I use the word God, but if you use pretend God is this container that is filled with all this joy, literally empty it completely out. So it's just the term. So I don't know what else to call it.
Other people call it the universe. Some people call it
but the universe is material. To have a material existence that started at the singularity, you have to have some kind of very good argument of how there can be nothing, and then something, and nothing started the something. And it doesn't need to be mind. It doesn't have to even be intent. It just has to be something. Logically, like unless logic is just a local fluke that happens to work on Earth because it just happens, or is logic actually
universal,
congruent with the structure of the universe so we can know it? We have to agree that something can't just come from nothing.
We're almost agreeing.
Semantics,
because
so at that point, pre-religious, logically, there's something before. There's something made what we see. Doesn't need to be intentional. Doesn't even need to be.
If I call it the singularity and you call it God, what was before that?
See, this is where a ideological commitment to materialism is intellectual suicide, because you get to the edge of the universe and you go, literally, I have not heard any explanation that is not willing to go to something else, something supramaterial. That doesn't sound like something magic happened. There's no logical difference to a whole lot of explanations. I think non-Christians, even all the world monotheistic religions of the best sort, strip it all off of the religious sort of revelation bit, will talk about a something that had to be the beginning of something, logically speaking.
The unmoved
God, and we add all that other stuff like Rowie was saying. But at that moment, I think we need something more than the universe, because the universe can't be the reason for the universe. You can't be your own beginning. You can't be the reason for yourself.
But that is saying God is
incoherence, because that logic doesn't work in any other conversation we ever have. It's just a special pleading for people ideologically committed to materialism, that they cannot just say something beyond the universe started the universe. Logically,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
I'm not saying that you say that. I just say there are others that do say that. And I think we find ourselves in agreement at the point. You might call it singularity. Let's call it singularity. That's a cool name for that part of it.
Well,
I think it's like
singularity, isn't it? These are the single thing, the thing.
Yeah. I think the difference is, right, so the singularity, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess from an atheist point of view, that singularity is an event, whereas God is the author of the event, right? In the different ideas. So the idea of God is something that can have no beginning, can be, or there is nothing that created God, just always was. But the singularity as an event cannot. And I guess if that event, the Big Bang, the singularity, whatever it is, which I believe in, I think there was this thing that happened that just took everything in and is still moving at a rate of however many light years and just expanding is phenomenal. I believe all of that. But I think if that obeys any understanding that we have around science in the form of an event, there had to be a catalyst for it. It doesn't go from there being nothing to there being everything. I think that's the difference. And for me, the idea of Occam's razor, actually, when you include all possibilities, including the possibility that there is a creator, I actually think that meets the definition of Occam's razor being the simplest solution, because logically it makes more sense to me that there was this thing, whether we can explain it or understand it or not, that instigated this thing that caused it, rather than it coming out of nothing that defies all scientific understanding.
I'm so sympathetic.
Anyway.
So sympathetic to the argument, Luke. I genuinely am. However, I guess that's the major difference between Luke and Rich and me, and maybe even Rowie, is I stop at the point at which it involves magic. You know?
Yeah, I hear that.
Well,
and I know you call it
how would you explain nothing, something?
Well, that's exactly
without
what
a
God
cause.
is. Like, What you're saying? It's God, 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 but there was no
No,
beginning.
no. I'm not saying what I say. What would you say? Nothing, nothing, nothing. Something without a cause.
I don't understand it, but I'm not prepared to ascribe that to magic or to supernatural. I want an answer.
No,
that is
but what
based
is the
on-
explanation then?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, and I haven't done the research. But
Well,
very
it doesn't
much
matter if you
say
are a
that
scientist because
know.
no one
I
actually
don't
knows anyway.
understand.
So
Therefore, God.
So,
if you
so
want,
this
if
is
you want the
this is the
hypothetical,
argument, is that there has to be a cause for something to happen out of nothing, logically speaking. That's all I'm saying.
I think this presupposes logic because it's before physics.
So you're saying logic is only localized to our own experience.
Oh,
That's
it
not
absolutely
just
is,
an
and we've already
utter
established
fluke.
that.
It's an utter fluke that science works. You have to go there.
No, we
There's
did
no
touch on this.
way not to go
Recall?
there.
A good 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think we touched on exactly this, where we're in the Goldilocks zone. The only reason we're here to be able to discuss this and understand this is because the conditions are precisely what is needed for us to be here to be able to discuss this.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm talking about is how logic actually works. There's one way it says it's just a fluke that happens to work. It's an accident, or it's actually the fundamental reality of the universe. You can't have it. It has to be one or the other. And if it's the fundamental reality of the universe, it works all the way back and before. And so people say, "Oh, logic just didn't exist then." That's just the same as saying a fairy godmother came and waved a wand. There's logically no difference to that explanation. That's all I'm saying, is that for those who say, you might say, it's too complex, I'm not going to think about it. That's okay. As far as you want to say the universe starts in an event, I'm not going to think anything before. But logic requires that if you claim that there was nothing and there's something happened, something has to have caused it. And that thing is what every great philosophy and intellectual religious thinking would put the container God at. Not a personality, not a necessarily. That all comes later when you start speaking to the religious conversation. But before, I don't think you can get away with logical necessity of something.
can we just put the slide rules down for a second and just?
Yeah.
I get a buzz out of talking about things that we can actually understand and explain it, and hypotheticals are frustrating if nothing else, because we're all just pulling ideas and concepts and theories out of the sky.
You started the wrong podcast then, right?
No. I actually started the right podcast. You're in the wrong podcast.
Probably.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I am absolutely. I mean, yeah. Anyway, let's move on, because there's a few comments coming through from Fenton and the unpronounceable person saying the Old Testament God was originally a storm god who dwells around high mountains. He was later transformed into a war god because of politics, like how David and Solomon goes to war on their neighbors. I want to get clarification to our two learned friends here who are biblical experts, probably push, painting him a little bit too high above. No, I'm joking. You are. So I just want to continue with Fenton before we talk to Luke and Rich about that, because that's a very powerful statement, and I want to try and clear it up a little bit. Fenton says, I think the most interesting aspect to think about is how we perceive normativity. Oh, sorry, I jumped over. I went from reading this little one down here to the big one and got caught up. I perceive normativity, and also how we can't know if a mere creator could delude us into perceiving normativity anyway, if any way it wants. Okay. Anyone care to unpack that?
I think what he's talking about is a sufficiently powerful being or force we wouldn't know the difference between apprehending or understanding reality because that's what reality is, or understanding reality because we've been deceived by something bigger than us.
Well, I can wrap my head around that. I mean, I think that I still can't get back. Like Luke mentioned something a couple of minutes ago about how God has always been, and I don't buy that, because God only became into existence when we decided that we were going to adopt him and believe in him. Do you
That's
know,
only
God?
true if God's an idea. If God is a projection, that's true. Absolutely. If God is something, if God is in any way, shape, or form real, whether we understand it or not, then that God pre-exists our understanding or knowledge or religion.
No, but we gave life to God. God, up
That's
until
what
the
I'm saying. In that way of thinking, yes.
I mean, God, the three-letter word God is also man-made name, as is creator. So someone at some stage decided that something was in the sky causing all of this stuff. Then they decided to label it. They weren't invited. God didn't come down and say, "Hey, listen, guys, just let you know, I'm all over this. I'm not the dude. I can explain all of it, but at the moment you need to address me. I invite you to be a part of my life. My name is God. Let's take it from there." None of that happened. So we invited him, or took him and his identity, and created a God in our minds. There was no proof. There was nothing.
But we had people that we knew that took 3 weeks to name their daughter, their newborn daughter, and I'm not going to name names or do anything. Does that mean that for those 3 weeks, because that child didn't have a name, that the child didn't exist? The child existed. That they figured out what they wanted to call it.
But that child is provable, Luke, because you could see the baby. It didn't have a name. So you could see, 1, it exists. 2, it doesn't have a name. You can't apply that to God. It's impossible.
Of course not.
All you can say is we think there's something up there causing all of this.
Oh, you got muted, Roy. You're quiet. Roy's very quiet. Very quiet.
It's probably going to be the most profound things ever said, and we've missed it.
Yeah, Rowie, you've gone quiet.
Prayers answered.
We lost it. For 30 seconds, he's so passionate about it, and it's all gone.
Oh no!
What was the last thing that he said? Because he's going to have to say it all
such
again.
a roll then too. There's bloody mute.
No.
So good.
God is saying, "Can you hear me?"
But we didn't hear any of it.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can't hear me?
Can now.
You can hear me, because I can't hear anything.
Oh no!
Can you say, one of you guys say something so I can tell my mic's working?
Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, I can't hear it.
Actually, while he's still listening,
Okay.
Luke,
As long as you can hear me, that's all that matters.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the question
I'm going to reboot. I'll be back in a sec.
All righty. The question is, Luke, are you suggesting that whether we call it the creator, whether we call it God, whatever the terminology that Pete wants to use, ultimately what it comes down to is meaning? Because like when I talk about the universe, and I'm saying there was no intent, that it could have been an accident, that it just happened, there's no meaning there. There's no deliberation. There's no desire for an outcome or a conclusion. Whereas for you, when you talk about God, it's about meaning. There's a whole reason for the creation and the existence and the judgment.
Yes, in a way. What I was saying was and Rowie, I haven't forgotten. I'll get back to you, but just answering Jace quickly. The meaning, I think, is important in understanding why we seek to label a creator in the language that we're using, why we take a creator into God territory, right? God being our attempt to understand and label and figure out this thing rather than abject creator. Whereas if there is no meaning, that's okay, right? If it was proven that there's no God, that this was a massive fortunate accident, that life exists, that all of this exists, that we somehow figured out the cause of the singularity and realized that actually it's possible, whatever, that sort of stuff. I think I was saying it's easier to accept that there is no meaning behind it and then go on, rather than the idea of a creator who brings everything into existence and then checks out or does it for no reason and there is no purpose. It's like giving a piece of the puzzle but saying don't do any of the rest of the puzzle because there are no more puzzle pieces. There's just this corner piece and that's all you have and that's all there is. And it's like, why is there that? Because there just is that. It's just a corner piece. It's like it's hard to figure that out, why there wouldn't be other puzzle pieces that would make a comprehensible picture. Whereas if there was no corner puzzle piece, it's easier to accept. Do you know what I mean? That was sort of more my point. So yeah, I think you're right. Meaning has got a big thing to it. Yeah, big part of it.
I'm just a simple man.
Mate, so am I. That's why we get along. Rolly, what were you saying before you went AWOL?
Oh, mate, I was on a roll. I had everything
I
solved,
know.
and
It looked
you guys
good.
you deliberately.
I was toast, mate. I could see it.
Well,
I could see it.
all
I
the
was
facial-
absolutely cackling.
all the facial expressions you were pulling because
I was
you couldn't hear me.
engrossed.
I was thinking I'm on a roll. I've
I was
got
this
it.
close to
Wow.
becoming an atheist, mate. If I
I
hadn't
know.
heard any of
There's
that,
so
I
much
was.
passion.
Well, luckily for you, I've got the script here, brother, and I'm going to
Quick, plug your
post that
ears.
fucking post haste snail mail. I can't remember what the hell I was
Before you visit us with your wisdom, I'm going to have to catch the rest of the recording because I'm going to
Yes.
have to leave this fascinating conversation to the three wise men here.
Fat cat's gone to bed.
Well, don't
Yeah.
blame us if you come back on Monday and just go, they solved everything and I wasn't there. You know,
Now Luke's an atheist.
Do you know what? It sounds just like what I was told at church. Don't miss out on Sunday because God would
that's the
visit us and
one.
you'll miss out.
Now, Rich,
Ministry
I
of
tried
presence. Be in
to
the
log
room.
out and I got the code number and I got back in, but I couldn't find you guys. So I don't know where I'm at. I've got the end stream insignia up in the right-hand top corner, which is what I need.
You're right to control the rest of the evening's festivities then.
Okay, well, this can only end in disaster. That's all I can tell you.
All right.
Favorite.
Fabulous. Thanks,
Fascinating
Rich.
conversation, one worth having. So, but I'll leave you guys to it.
Thanks,
All right,
Rich.
yeah.
I'll
Look
just
forward to
defend
talking to you on
orthodoxy.
the recording.
Excellent. I'll come
Yeah.
and drop my own comments in it.
Okay.
Thanks, mate.
See you on the flip
See you
side.
guys.
All right, Rich. Cheers. Not sure what happened to Suresh. Did he mention he had to drop off early?
He did. Yep.
He did,
He
yeah.
had to go.
Oh, he did. Oh, okay. That's cool.
I noticed
That's
in the
cool.
private chat, he said so. He said he's going to slip away
Look,
quietly.
I had an amazing stuff written down as I do every time I start, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But what I wanted to mention, because the reason why I want to say this, because I get to mention the sugar plum fairy,
Oh,
which I think is absolutely it's the bee's knees of provable theories. And this is controversial for you, Luke. So just here we go. What I wrote, and this is at the end of a long rant. I said, if religious people think that knowing more by studying the Bible will help take care of one another, and this is the whole the main theme that I wanted to run through tonight about taking care of people. And that's all you really need, is to know how to just want to take care of people. That's the solution to everything. So I wrote, if religious people think that knowing more by studying the Bible will help people care for one another, history would prove them 100% wrong. It doesn't work, and people can create more and more religions for eternity, and none of them will work. They are all flawed because we are flawed, and not Jesus, Zeus, Vishnu, or the sugar plum fairy can make any difference, because if there is a creator and we have not yet a way of knowing there is, we don't know one single thing about it. Every single thing about God's God or gods was created by our need to know the Christian God is just another one in that list. So it's all about caring. And I thought about this, and I thought, if you know that Jesus was about love and it was all about caring for people, you could read the Bible from cover to cover a million times, and there's nothing you could add to that. Most important message is care for one another. There's nothing out of all the scriptures and all the great stories and all the parables and all of the things in there. You can't add any more to Jesus' message, which is love, of caring for one another. And if that's the solution to solve the problems of the world, so be it. You don't need anything in order to do that. And I think that that's great, because who can't care? Who couldn't be willing to want to care for someone? Of course, there are people who don't care. And then there's Donald Trump's a classic example. But for every able, normal, intellectual person, caring is one of the simplest things. You don't need to go to university. You don't need to read books. You don't need to do anything. All you need to do is have a heart and compassion for people and love them. That is my sermon for the night. Thank you.
But we're so much more than
Luke's
that.
shaking his head, so I'm not sure which part of it he's dismayed about.
No,
Hey?
I'm saying, yeah.
Ducks
I like
care
that.
about their ducklings.
What, sorry?
Well, I was just saying, we look, I'm an atheist, but just from my perspective, there's more to it than just love and care, because, ducks care about their ducklings. That's not even a conscious thing. They don't know what they're doing. They're just programmed to actually do that.
Yeah, in case you didn't notice, we're a little higher on the chain than them.
We are. But at the end of the day, we're just animals.
Yes,
we
but what we do
so much more, don't we? We project so much onto things, and we try to establish meaning. We try to establish intent. There's so many things that we do that are just extrapolations of our imagination. But ultimately, I'm with you, Pete, on the one idea that it's about love. It's about care. It's about sharing. It's about making sure that we work with each other to make the world a better place. Lost the audio? Sometimes maybe I can.
Wow.
Do an interpretive dance, Jace. Just go out and back in again.
Back out, jump out. Oh, there we go. That's the way to do it.
He understood that. See how I did that?
He understood, didn't he? He did well. You did well. You speak the universal language, Luke.
I do. It's a gift.
I am having a fabulous night.
Luke has been touched by the hand of God.
I said this. I said, just log out, log back in again. And you just did it. Yeah. And I said, see, he understood. Yeah. That's
the Holy
kind of like
Spirit
sign
told
language.
Me, mate. Yeah.
See, mate.
Hey.
Proof. Podcast over.
Do you know what's really interesting as a side issue, and this won't mean anything to Jace, but it'll mean something to you, Luke, and Rich, if he was here. Back in the day when I was a Christian, there was never a conversation about God and Jesus without the Holy Spirit being involved. Now, that's very much a Pentecostal strong point, I guess, about the spiritual nature of their.
What's that mean, Pete? What's that mean?
Well, it's the trilogy. It's Jesus, it's God, it's the Holy Spirit, which is what the Catholics do, and of course they do their whole. Except they don't call it necessarily the Holy Spirit. But
look, apologies for asking such a stupid basic question, but why is there that split? What is the triumvirate for?
It's thoroughly orthodox. It's an understanding, again, not from the Bible, as in it's not written down in the Bible, but it's it's an interpretation and understanding, I guess, philosophically and theologically from what we see in the Bible. The idea of God is notoriously difficult to explain, but the idea of God, not three gods, but one God, operating in different personalities.
Multiple personality disorder.
Correct, yes.
For those of us who are Pentecostal, that you couldn't really have fulfilled your role as a Christian unless you are baptized. And the way you do that is through the Holy Spirit and talking in tongues and all that kind of stuff. That's, yeah.
I mean, yeah, the Pentecostal.
Tongues in the Bible?
Sorry?
Where is
Tongues
the
is
Spirit
definitely
in
in the Bible.
the Bible?
It's in
It is in
a
the
few of the
Bible.
letters.
Is it?
It's in some. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's but again, it ends up becoming semantics. It becomes these little points of difference where we like to think that this is why we're in and you're out. You know, not just you're out as in atheists, as in other Christians who are of a different denomination or a different
Because
it's
rather than
exclusionary. It's inherently
it's seen as a gift. Can you talk in tongues, Luke? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't see
I
it
mean,
as
I
something
still can.
that's
I still can too.
Spirit.
I can still do it now, and I have no idea. When you talk in tongues as a Christian, there are people who can be listening who can interpret what it is you're actually saying through the Holy Spirit, as opposed to me, who it means nothing. But it's still there. I don't know what the hell it is, and I don't know why it is, but it's still there.
I mean, we create all sorts of different ideas around it. But at the end of the day, I mean, drawing it back to the original concept of the Holy Spirit, it's God's active spirit in the world. It's like Jesus is no longer here. God, the Father, the Creator, transcending that. It's like God's active presence in the world is what we refer to as the Holy Spirit. And again, we give stuff language, we give stuff meaning, we give stuff labels, because that's how our brains, that's what we need. We need to do that to understand stuff. Us labeling things, us giving things a framework, a structure, does not create those things. It just helps us understand the reality of those things, right? If you understand what I mean. So this is that's probably the best way to kind of, for me to explain it or to understand it. And I don't fully understand it, nor could I. But I think that the Trinity, the idea of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is certainly not just a Pentecostal thing. It's a thoroughly Orthodox thing. But we tend to focus on different areas that suit our particular flavor. So Pentecost love the Holy Spirit because it's kind of like it's a bit loose, it's all over the shop.
One of the scariest experiences of my life, guys. So many years ago, we're talking 20 plus years ago, I had a girlfriend that was an evangelical Christian, and she invited me to come along to church one Sunday. And I thought, you know what, as an avowed atheist, I'm quite happy to go along and experience this. And you guys may know of this church. I think it was called the Vineyard Church or something along those lines in Osborne Park. Anyway, we turned up there a little bit like the church that used to be part of, Pete. There was very much an audio-visual experience with bands and lighting and whatnot. And suffice to say, I quite enjoyed the sense of inclusivity and the conversations around love and all of this kind of thing. And then the speaking in voices started. And I have never been so scared in all my life. Honestly, these people started getting up, started babbling, throwing their hands in the air and dancing on the spot. And I, at that point, was desperate to leave the room because I was a young man who was intensely frightened.
The churches I've been to were perhaps a little bit more laid back than that, but certainly the hands in the air and the singing and it was a celebration. It was like being at a party but being straight. It's kind of a bit strange, but it's a weird experience to think about it now and look back and go, wow, I was actually a part of that. I was a guy straight out of being in bands in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and suddenly there I was, this straight dude feeling completely and utterly alone and out of his depth.
The first thing I think is there's a man who was all about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's writ large all over you, Pete.
Mate.
Now,
it may as well be on your forehead. It's just dripping with
it. I tell you what, hang on half a second. I've got this here.
Here we go. He's going to get out his ACDC t-shirt.
I thought you were taking your shirt off.
Get the guitar out, Pete. Show us.
Okay.
Whoa.
me. That's me there
With all the hair?
with all the hair.
No.
Right. That mullet needs to make a comeback pronto.
Oh my goodness me. Wow.
That
that's
was the
glorious.
band's Secret Reasons.
And you were
That was
part
at
of the Angels.
Yeah, mate. We
Mate,
I
we
hope
we
to
went.
see your face again, Pete.
Hey, yeah. We took that band to Port Hedland, and we all know what Port Hedland's like. It's a pretty rough place. And walking in with hair like that, I got to tell you, I was lucky to get out of there alive.
I know Cost Plus up there doesn't sell a lot in the way of hairspray.
No, I took my own.
Of course he did. The first thing was packed.
in all seriousness, that hair. There used to
Was
be
that yours?
yeah, absolutely, mate. Big black cans of hair lacquer. Huge
Right.
things.
That-
If you want to know
that's
about
proof-
the hole in the ozone layer, it was mine. I did that. I went
How
through
old
a
were you
can
when
of
it turned from black to white, Pete?
how what?
How old were you when it turned from black to white?
Well, there was a gradual change of
Right.
hue. You know, it
Because I
wasn't-
noticed mine's doing exactly the same thing.
yes, I did notice you were modeling your color of your beard on the top of my head.
I love
A
it.
couple of
Proof of
messages
God,
from
mate.
Fenton. Hey,
I said that's proof of God. That hair right there.
Is it? Right.
That's hey,
which
you don't grow
The
that
holy
without a
hairspray.
meaning.
so Fenton, it's really hard to discuss a creator without axiology skipping in.
Axiology
Okay,
being
Fenton.
meaning the study of value, of reason, of purpose.
Yeah, which is what I've been saying. Just Fenton's smarter than me, so he's able to succinctly say it in a sentence, and I have to skip around for like an hour and like say it in about 1,000 different ways.
Use your words, Luke. Use your words.
Yeah.
You know what?
Fenton-
You know what?
Fenton-
You know what I reckon Fenton's doing tonight. He was absolutely appalled with my ribbing of him. Well, no, it wasn't ribbing. I think Tyler's are amazing people.
Oh, did he? Did he send you a message?
All right,
He's
he's
gone.
gone muted again. No.
Maybe Fenton's hacked him. That's
friggin'
what's
mute
happened.
thing.
Fenton's
Yeah,
hacked
Now
him.
back.
it's gone again. I can't.
No, you're back now. We can hear you.
Yeah, he can't hear us.
What is going on?
You can't hear us now. Oh, paint.
Wow.
It's the holy hand grenade. That's the problem. There we go. That was me. Fenton.
Fenton just said that was me.
Fenton is the offender.
Mate,
Yeah,
he's got your number.
Good guys. I know. Yeah, it's hilarious. No, what I
Fenton's
was
hacked
saying,
us.
I don't know why it keeps cutting out. It's driving me crazy. What I was saying is that's Fenton's get back. Oh, he did hear me say that when I said I was having to go about his tiling. So he's chucked in a word like axiology there and showing off his he knows more than one syllable words.
He does.
And then what's he saying?
How
That
about you,
was
Pete? I learned
me.
the hard way. I avoid long words because people don't understand them and then they don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yes. Well, that's classical
want me to-
dissidence.
Pete, did you
But I
want me
do
to
call it
comment on-
profanity.
Did you want me
Sorry?
to comment on Bob J's earlier comment about the Old Testament God? Was that something you wanted? Did you want to go? there at some point?
Yeah. Originally a storm god who dwells around high mountains. He was later transformed into a war god because of politics, like how David and Solomon goes to war on their neighbors. I never studied the Bible that intimately that I don't have any idea what they're talking about. So go for it, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
So most Christians, the response to that would be, "How dare you? You know, there is one picture of God consistent through the whole Bible." But it's not that's not true. That's not what we see in the Bible. In fact, was it I'm just going to say Al Bob J.
I
Is
don't
spot
know.
on. It's just pretty spot on with what he's saying here. And I say that with how God is depicted. That doesn't mean that God was like that, but we certainly see in early stages of the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is not in chronological order of the way it was written. People don't realize that. They think that's the order but it wasn't. It's kind of all over the shop. But we certainly see this idea of God, before Yahweh, like Elohim, and it was based on this idea of a storm god. In fact, the early understanding of God that we see represented in the Bible was not this one true God and no other gods existed. It was one God, this regional God, amongst a whole bunch of other gods. Right? But it's just that our God was stronger than the other gods. That was what they thought, right? And it's this progression that we see, and certainly it does progress into this idea of where he says a war god because of politics. So David and Solomon goes to war on their neighbors. We see this very much in the conquest narratives. So the book of Joshua, particularly where it's kind of like this group of people, and it's like, God's commanding a lot of the stuff. God's commanding genocide, and it's like, take these people. Why? Well, because that's your land, and they shouldn't be on your land. So murder everyone, including infants and women and donkeys and everything. It's like we see this. So because their understanding of God was God is powerful, and our God is the most powerful, and the way you demonstrate that power is through military might. And so there's all of this sort of stuff going on. And so they're writing these things down. These are the stories that they have, and these stories make it into the Bible. And so we see that. But then there is a progression. We see this developing understanding. And in fact, what a lot of people don't realize is all through the Bible, there are competing theologies. There are competing ideas of who God is. And there is a strong, strong tension, a very strong tension between two different kind of understandings of God, all the way through, culminating in the New Testament in Jesus being God revealed, right? And God is nothing like what they thought in Jesus. And so when we hear this sort of stuff, well, that's correct. We do see that in the Bible, this progression of God. That doesn't mean God was like this and then he kind of started to change and he sort of like figured stuff out and developed. God never developed. It was our understanding of God that developed. And that's kind of what you would expect to see. Like looking at these as ancient documents, unless you have an idea of the Bible as a book that fell out of the sky, or a book where God is literally whispering into the ears of people that are writing this stuff, which if that's the case, we are cactus, because some of the shit in there is really bad.
Oh, yeah.
If God's whispering that, I don't want to know God. But
Luke, carry on in a sec, but I want to give you my favorite verse from the Bible. Jeremiah 25:27. What do you reckon? Off the top of your head, do you know it?
Mate, I've never been big on memorizing verses.
Drink, get drunk, vomit, fall down, and never get up again. Thank you, God. Yep.
There you go. There you go. If you're a Bible literacist, if you're reading that flat, why has that not got more weight than something else? It's like, so here's the thing.
I'm sure it means something in context, but I just enjoy it on face value.
Yeah, but we don't take stuff in context, mate. It's verse by verse. You know this. You want to hate gay people? Pick a verse. Don't look at the character of Jesus. Don't look at the progression of God. Don't look at the inclusivity of what it means to be a child of God.
You're a biblical scholar, Luke. You're a biblical scholar. What are the first three words of the Bible?
In the beginning.
What's the final word of the Bible?
And there.
It's exactly what you would imagine it should be.
In the end.
What?
Amen.
I don't remember.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I thought it was.
The Bible I've got, it says, sorry, this was all a joke. That's the last thing it says in my Bible.
It says copyright 1967.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you as well. Sorry, just before you go. what's the name of the guy? In Waltzing Matilda. What's the name of the guy who gets caught by
Andy?
the coppers? Yeah,
What, Ned Kelly?
Yeah, no, Andy. Andy sang and he watched and he waited. Yeah.
Well, you know
Excellent.
what Jesus' middle name is, don't you?
Horatio.
Harold.
Harold.
Do you know how I know that?
Yeah.
Why?
Harold
Our
be thy
Father
name.
who art in heaven, Harold be thy name.
Brilliant.
I
Brilliant.
just said that. You didn't have to read the whole thing. Sorry, Luke, were you
Jesus,
finished?
Christ, come on.
I was finished on that. That's just, it was a little comment on how this progression of God that we see in the Old Testament is not proof that the Bible is rubbish. It's not proof that God doesn't exist. It's fact. It's kind of what we should expect to see in these ancient collection of documents from an ancient tribal people. And when we try and resist it, then we're doing it a disservice because we're putting expectations on the Bible that it was never written or designed to have. So I think the problem that we have a lot of the time is that the Bible doesn't behave the way we expect it to, or with the way we've been told that it does behave, and that leads to all sorts of problems. But maybe if we read it the way that we are supposed to read it,
But Luke,
and
what of the
it
fact that
changes
the
things.
Bible prior to the Council of Nicaea was quite a different document? I mean, it
Yes, right.
changed enormously after the Council of Nicaea to fit what the Catholic Church wanted its subjects to believe.
Of
It became
course.
a behavioral text.
Listen, the textual religious texts, sacred texts in any single aspect. So for any religion, and Christianity or Judaism is no different, has always been in some ways an imperial project, because the people that were scribes, right, at the time, the people that could write and the people that were in a position to write were people at the top. There's no way about it. We don't have peasants writing. We don't have commoners writing. That's why there was in fact, this is why a lot of the stuff that we read in the Bible, because we see the position of the oppressed, we see it from the perspective of the below rather than the oppressed on top, which is really what we see in most every other document outside. Like most ancient documents, most sacred texts are from the position of power. So when we see text written from below, it's unusual. That's why I think I see God and a revelation of God in a lot of the texts, despite the authors, rather than because of the authors, if that makes sense. And that would be the only pushback that I would have on Rowie, what your the sugar plum stuff, which was a lovely soliloquy. It was beautiful. I get it, and it rings absolutely true. If the only value of the Bible comes because Jesus rocked up and said, "Just care for each other," that wasn't necessarily a radical concept. I mean, it was subversive in its own way and all this sort of stuff. But he's not the only historical figure to have said that sort of stuff. Yeah,
It's only been two in history, and they killed both of them.
Well, I mean, but if we set aside the presupposition that that's all the Bible is saying, and we're open to the fact that there might be it might be saying more, there might be something more being revealed through that.
Of course, there is more. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you don't need that. What more do you need to care for one another?
No. What I'm saying is like
statement.
No, what I'm saying is more than just caring for one another. I'm a big believer that there's something else going on, and I think for me, René Girard, and I mention him all the time, that French anthropologist, his insights into what the Bible is doing are phenomenal, because he started out looking at the Bible as an atheist, and he had no, and so he was trying to understand what's going on here. in comparison to a lot of other myths, a lot of other literature, all this sort of stuff. So, and he came at it from an anthropological idea of what makes humans human. Why do humans do what they do? And his revelation, his insight, and then applying that and seeing that the Bible kind of fits, but it also doesn't, and it starts to move this understanding. And then in the story of Jesus completely undoes it, is incredible and is unlike any other document in the history of the world.
Would you not agree that in 2024 you could get a much more simplified, accurate understanding of, other than caring and loving the other edition that you mentioned? The problem with the Bible, and you said if you read the Bible such and such a way, the problem, Luke, with the Bible is you can't read it in such and such a way that you understand without an enormous amount of study, with an enormous amount of time as a document on teaching life and how to live, and the intricacies of what Jesus is talking about. You could sit down now and write a 2-page document that would be far easier for everyone to understand, whereas the Bible, unless you're at a level of intelligence, you're not going to understand any of it, as opposed to a simplified document which just says, this is what Jesus did, this is who he was, this is why he did it, and here's the deal in 2 pages, as opposed to scripture after scripture after scripture, which really has very little to do with understanding, just care and love one another. That's in its simplest form. In other words, if you just only knew to care for one another and got the rest of the Bible, not disrespectfully, but put it in the drawer and shut the door, you would then learn the most important thing in life as a human, which is to care for one another. All the other stuff, whilst it might be challenging for you, and it is, and there's a lot of stuff in there that you get out of it from a philosophical and intelligent level, because it's a very complicated book, simply because a lot of it is actually badly written and it's full of contradictions and stuff like that. But for you, it's a challenge and it's important. For people who just need to understand the message of Jesus, it's love and care for one another. You really don't need, and I think it's not helpful to tell people who are believers that they can understand the Bible if they listen to the way it's taught. It's a lifetime of trying to understand the Bible. I spent 25 years in it, and I still have very little idea about what, apart from the important bits. I used to read the Bible all the time, and it's like it'd be like me writing a science book on something, or reading a book about algebra or trigonometry. I could read it all I like, still not going to get it.
I agree. The thing is, I think, you've gone mute.
You're muted again, Rowie.
I've gone again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, back again.
Can you hear us?
Okay, I can't hear you. This is doing this all night. I'm going to reboot again. Hang on.
We need subtitles. Subtitles. Or we just learn ASL.
It's a good idea. Everyone should learn it. They should teach that at school. Love it. Rowie, if you can you hear me?
Yeah, man, I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I think when we tell people that the Bible is basic and simple, and all you got to do is just read it, or if you study it, it's going to magically make sense. We're doing people a disservice, because this is a complex book. It's a complex library of ancient documents, and it reads as such. There are complexities. There's historical stuff. There's a whole lot behind it. In saying that, the Gospels are reasonably simple. And I think as followers of Jesus, here's the problem. We often teach the Bible, and this is linked to our understanding of it as the inspired word of God, or it being inerrant, or it being infallible. All of those things are incorrect. The word of God is Jesus. The Bible is a book. It testifies to Jesus. There's some incredible stuff in there, but it is not something to be worshipped. It is not something for us to build our faith around. It is something to help guide our faith in something that's outside of that book. And we get that wrong all the time. But when we put the book on this pedestal, we have to read it flat, because if God said it, if it's the inspired word of God, well, you can't pick and choose. It's all got to be equal, which means it's all got to be flat, which means if Jesus says something you don't particularly agree with, just go find something that Joshua said or Moses said or that's in this and just go on that one. Like, they conflict with one another, but if it's flat, they're both equally valid.
Right.
The thing is, it's not flat. We cannot read it flat. We have to read it with the Gospels being the thing that we read everything else through. That carries more weight. Jesus carries more weight. It has to. And so if we read the Gospels, you don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar. You don't have to be a Bible scholar to be able to understand it. You can just take it and go, I understand what this guy is about, and just leave it at that. But there is so much more for those that want to go deeper. And I think the Bible is revealing so much more to us, even in the Old Testament, about the nature of scapegoating, the nature of all against one, the role of the victim, but most importantly, where God sits in all of that, God's position on scapegoating, power, and the victim, and violence first and foremost. Violence is not a side issue. I think it's the primary issue.
So talking about the New Testament for a moment. So in the Bible, there is instructions on the things that we should do and we shouldn't do. They're explicit instructions. So the 10 Commandments are, these are the things that you should do and shouldn't do. But there's also things in there that say things like, you should not get a tattoo. You should not wear garments of mixed cloth. You should not eat meat from the cloven hoof, blah, blah, blah.
Totally.
Is that black and white? Do we follow those rules or not?
No. I mean,
right. So how do we pick and choose? Like the 10 Commandments, do we pick and choose there as well?
We need a hermeneutic. The hermeneutic is the key that you read everything through. That's just a fancy word for it. For me, the hermeneutic has to be Jesus. We see the life of Jesus. We see what Jesus stood for. That's then what we have to read stuff through. So if there is something in Leviticus that says if someone is having their period, they're not allowed to be within the town center. They have to be out, kick them out for the week or whatever, and then they can come back in, and then they can't speak. And then you go, okay, well, Jesus is literally healing the woman with the issue of blood who has been bleeding for 12 years. It's like, what's his interaction with her? He's showing her dignity. He's upholding her. He's elevating her in the eyes of everyone who cannot see her and all this sort of stuff. So I go, okay, so that's how Jesus is treating this woman. And if Jesus is actually who he says he is, being, I am representing the exact character of God. It's like Jesus' whole mantra was, you guys, you're hung up on who God is like. You see me, you see the Father. You see me, you see the Father. He says it over and over again in so many different ways. So he's like really extra about saying, guys, I'm not some version of God. I'm not this and that. Like, if you want to know what God's like, I'm only doing what he's telling me to do, sort of thing, right? So I see that and I go, okay, if I value this, if I'm using Jesus as my hermeneutic, as the lens, I now need to, when I come across that thing in Leviticus that says that, I go, Jesus wouldn't do that. Just like when I read, and God commanded Moses to take the Canaanites and put the Amalekites to the ban and completely kill everyone, I go, oh, the same God who went to the cross without raising a finger in violence or doing anything like that. Oh, God didn't do that. We thought God did, but he didn't. So how do I read this now? In fact, I think God's with the Canaanites. He is on their side. He is always on the side of the victim, on the side of the oppressed. That's the kind of God that is revealed. So I can't read that flat. I have to read it through that lens. It's not a pick and choose. It's not cherry picking. It's saying, I'm going to put my glasses on that are informed fully by what the life of Jesus, and I now have to reread the Bible through that, which means I need to have the. Hey,
why is it there then? Why does the Bible specifically prohibit tattoos, for example?
Because it's a snapshot of the people at that point in time, which has its own value. We see this progressive understanding of people and what they thought God was like. Does that mean God was like that? No. It doesn't mean God changed. No. But it also means that we can see this and go, if there is something intrinsically human in ascribing violence to God, in ascribing exclusion to God, in putting God into this warrior thing who is for us and against them, mate, it's not like that's stuck in the ancient times. We see that every day with Christian nationalism now. And if more Christians were able to read the Bible and go and read these stories, and instead of going, that's what God's like, so I'm going to adopt that mindset against my enemies and use God for my own agenda of power and all this sort of stuff. If instead they read that and went, wow, they got it wrong, but there's things in me that want to do that want to adopt God like that. So how do I change that? Because I know that Jesus isn't like that. All of a sudden then that stops things like Christian nationalism. It nips them in the bud because we see ourselves in it and we contrast it with the life of Jesus. Instead, with a flat literal reading of the Bible, we go, yeah, I'm just going to put Jesus to the side for a minute because I like this God.
Yeah.
I like
well, the reason I keep asking is I'm really worried for Pete because I noticed he's got a bunch of tattoos and I'm worried he's going to hell.
Oh, yeah, no, he's all good. He's good. I've spoken to the big man and I said, listen, he was
good news, Pete. Good news.
I said, I said, God, you saw his hair, mate. Don't worry about the tattoos. It went part and parcel of it.
That hair was biblical. It was.
He's got a pass.
Well, he's all good. I was successful in music because God was actually a fan. So, you know.
Why wouldn't he be?
You know what I find really interesting is that the technology wasn't even around to have tattoos back in the day. So I don't understand how that fits in. Everything else does.
Oh, mate.
Where did tattoos come from?
Something sharp as ink.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Prison tat.
They wouldn't have been called tattoos, surely. What if you look at the word tattoo and what it actually means? I'm sure it's a term.
They wouldn't be. That's translations.
If you look at the word virgin and what it actually means, when you bring it over from the original Hebrew, virgin doesn't mean woman who hasn't had sex. It means unmarried woman.
You know what's interesting, though?
If you find a woman and you marry her and on the night you discover she's not a virgin, you can take her to her father's front door, drop her on the ground and kill her.
No kinkies.
Yeah. Trying to fit, and I hate to end on an aggressive, as it were, note. But trying to fit in such an ancient book to try and fit into 2024, I find just absurd and bizarre on the highest level, trying to justify the Old Testament in any way, shape, or form.
Read the Good News Bible. It's much better.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, even the Good News Bible still has slavery in it, which is kind of overlooked a little bit. Doesn't end at the new covenant of Jesus. So there's lots of things. And the Old Testament. Anyway, there's a message from Tamara. Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Tamara.
Hello, Tamara. Where have you been for the last?
You're a bit late, Tamara. You missed all the good stuff.
No, she's been here. Yeah. She's just quiet.
Tam, what do you think? What's your assessment of tonight, and how many marks out of 10 do you give Luke for being incorrect?
Don't be so judgmental. He's doing his best. Again.
All right. I'm God's anointed. It's us against
10 out of 10. Wow.
10 out of 10.
You're on the cutting edge, Luke. You are. You're leveling.
Like 10 out of 10 incorrect.
You're not mid, mate. You're max.
Can you imagine
100%
what it would be
incorrect.
like if I even had something intelligent to say? You would have missed out on everything.
Oh, mate.
Oh, she's giving you 10 out of 10. Tamara.
She mustn't have
We
heard you
know-
say on a scale of 1 out of 10 of how incorrect he is.
Yeah. Oh, 10 out of 10 incorrect.
No,
Wow, that's different. Now give us a mark out of
3 out of 10
how
for meaning and
amazing.
Yeah.
intent.
I may be incorrect, but I'm passionately incorrect. That's at least
right.
that. At least I can have that.
It's all about the love.
Whatever you do, no matter how wrong it is, make sure you do it passionately. I understand
That's
that.
right. That's
Totally.
right.
Can I finish off with a thing from Ricky Gervais,
Oh, okay.
Yep.
who said, if you took away every religious and every science book in the world and destroyed them all, eventually all the science books would come back because facts are fact. However, no religious books would return. And if they did, how much would they be like the original scripts? There would be no need for them as far as I can see. I mean, look, and I think that stands to reason. I think science is always prevalent in any era, whereas religious texts that are old and outdated and so wrong or bad on so many levels, you would never recreate. No, how would you recreate the books of old? They would be simple, and it would be like the Good News Bible, but even stripped down further. But I don't think that would be relevant.
Be a pretty boring world, though. Imagine if all you had was
How?
textbooks.
How's
like-
it boring? What's boring?
No Shakespeare. It's like, Shakespeare's not introducing anything new.
No one's taken away Shakespeare. We're just taking away science books and religious books. The rest can stay.
What about the poetry in religious books, or the beautiful stories, or mythology, or different things?
Well, would they come back because they're religious, because they stand alone, because they are poetry? They have their own power and significance without the religiosity of it. Poetry of the Psalms. I mean, wow. I mean, I don't. Jace, you ever read the Psalms at all?
I've read the Bible back to back twice, my friend, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life.
All right, ignore
So
all the other stuff. Go to the Psalms. Go to the Psalms. It's a sexy book. There's lots of stuff in there, but it's the poetry. I mean, as a historical document of poetic genius, I mean, it stands alone in the world of great.
There was
poets.
one section of the Bible that went on for like 8 pages, and it was like John begat Simon, begat Jehovah,
beget the begets.
begat.
The only time you're interested in a begat is when you've got salmon and stuff to go with it.
It went
on.
on.
No,
hey, if we're going to do quotes, Rowie, you did a quote. Luke, I'm expecting you'll have a quote as well. I've got a quote from a famous person before we round out as well this evening. I'd like to give you a quote from one of the great philosophers of our time, Barry White.
Mm-hmm.
Barry White said, and I quote, word for word, I want to get this exactly right. He said, "We are all gods, all forces of nature. We can destroy, we can build. We are like oceans and like fires." But he had one further quote, which I think makes far more sense for the context of the conversations that we're having this evening. He actually said, and this is word for word, he said, "There's people making babies to my music. That's nice."
I think at the end of any deep philosophical argument, you start quoting Barry White. I think that's pretty much the end of the evening right there. I mean, there's no coming back from that.
Can't get enough of your love, baby.
Yeah. How do you top that? You can't.
Well, I would like to finish up with, "I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you want." Hey? That's what I'm
That's
talking
Liam
about.
Neeson.
Wow, mate.
I've got the whole thing if you want to hear it. I I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you want, but what I do have is a very special set of skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my
Oh.
daughter go, I'll say no more. If you don't, I will look for you. I will find you, and I will kill you.
Excellent.
End of the night. It actually sounds a lot better when I do it not in here. It sounds like shit, but it's basically the whole idea. So, yeah, great film. Great film. Just
That's sensational.
thank you.
You're very good, very talented.
Thanks, mate. I did an amazing gig on Saturday.
Oh, how'd it go?
Amana Living nursing home, whatever they're called these days.
Did you do the same song 10 times like you said you were going to?
Correct. 5 people were there, all over 100. There was 506 years between these 5 beautiful people.
Hang on, how old are you?
We sang "Give Me a Home Among the Gum Trees," all that stuff. It was absolutely fabulous. A great night. So hello to everyone who's listening, which will be
Well
one
done.
of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's all about love, Pete.
It's all about love, mate.
Good
Just
thing.
be
I love
kind.
that.
Just be kind to one another. If you achieve all of your religious goals, great. But if you don't, just love one another. That's all you can do.
That's all you can do, mate.
All you need is love. Da, 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 da.
The other one?
Oh yeah,
The Yardbirds
Right.
or something.
it's the Beatles.
Oh, no, I don't want binoculars. I want a love heart. There we go. Got to love one another right now. What's that? What's that? Is that the Yardbirds? No. I can't remember. I'm getting old. I'm getting old.
Yeah, well,
I'm too
congratulations.
old for this podcasting stuff. It's for you bloody millennials and Gen Xers and whatnot.
Glad you enjoyed it, Pete. Sounded like an amazing event. Oh, thank you so much, Tammy. It was absolutely beautiful, incredibly beautiful. In fact, I sang classic songs for 2.5 hours to all these lovely people, and they absolutely enjoyed it, which was hard for me to do because the day before I smashed the hell out of my car again.
Oh, no.
Same car,
Oh,
just got it back from the panel beaters, all fixed.
what did you do?
Beautiful, looking $1 million, and some dude in a ute decided to peel the whole front of my car to pieces. So I have no vehicle again. My pride and joy.
That is not on.
No, it's not.
Jeez.
And it was shocking.
You need to buy a bumper car.
Yeah. I've had two crashes in my life in 40 something years, and both of them are in this car and 6 months apart.
Oh God.
What is fair? Oh, what is fair dinkum? Oh, that's a great question, Fenton. Thank you so much. It's not dinkum, it's din cum. Now dinkum,
Right.
dinkum actually translates, it's actually Vietnamese meaning pure gold. So back in the day when, because Australia was renowned for being a place where people would give up their lives and try and find gold in places like Ballarat and Kalgoorlie. They were places where gold was aplenty. So when the Vietnamese and Chinese people found gold, it is din cam, not dinkum, but we adopted it and made it Australian. Din cam means pure gold. So when we say fair dinkum, mate, that means spot on, absolutely pure gold,
Legitimate.
Absolutely. Well, did I say fair dinkum in my?
Fair stuck in the sauce bottle, fellas.
That's it.
You know,
We need to have a whole podcast.
I said to Tash the other night, I said, yeah, we're not here to fuck spiders. And she goes, what is that? I said, have you ever heard that? She goes,
I only heard that for the first time 2 years ago.
She said, that's not a thing. I said, yes, it is.
Tell you what.
It is.
Tell you what, Luke, I reckon you got a few roos loose in the top paddock, buddy.
Absolutely. Fenton, if you're ever having a barbecue and there's a couple of snags missing, mate, that means your mates are just not right there. And you say, hey,
That's exactly right.
Bobby,
couple of wheels short of the semi.
couple of tinnies full of a half dozen. That's it. You know, it's
That's right.
what is
got to
fair
make
dinkum?
sure
I
that
must
there's
have
nobody
said it.
there that's got a face like the south end of a north-facing dog.
That's right. Fenton, if you want the best and most comprehensive song about, or what's not a song per se, go into YouTube and put in. It's a guy called
Ostentatious.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Oh, Anna.
It's called
Oh, Anna.
Australiana, and it's by a guy called Ostentatious. The man that wrote it, if you love cricket, which you probably don't as an American, but if you love cricket, there's a guy called 12th Man. His name is Billy.
Oh, yeah, sensational.
That is
What?
sensational.
He does a comedy thing about cricket, but he
awesome.
wrote for Ostentatious Australiana. It is just
So good.
brilliant.
Hey,
it is
that one
so
section of the 12th Man where he sits down for breakfast with his wife and he does the voiceover while he's having breakfast and she's bringing out the bacon. My God, that was the thing that got me into radio.
Is that right? One of my favorite interviews out of all the interviews I've done in my radio career was talking to Billy Birmingham, the 12th Man. It was hilarious. He is so good. So,
quick
fair dinkum, Fenton, do yourself a favor, brother.
Brilliant humor, inoffensive, non-sexist, non-racist, non-bigoted, just hugely funny.
Absolutely.
Very similar to Kimberly Coke Bottle.
Oh, yeah. Very similar in their
Whoa. Okay, you've just crossed over into racism big time. Big time. You know what we should do? We should have a podcast of people around the world talking about our great Australian lingo. In fact, I wrote a song called Aussie Lingo, which incorporates all of the great Aussie things that we talk about all the time. You know, it's it's fantastic. Fantastic. So that's a wrap, I think, gentlemen. 10:30.
It is a
It's
wrap.
only an hour over time.
I tell you guys just quickly.
Keep going if you want. I don't care.
I want to celebrate the fact that I've now got a magpie that comes to see me on a daily basis here in my shed. He actually flies in and he wants feeding. I posted a photo on Facebook about it. His name's Ken, and because it's Australia, his name's Ken Oath.
Ken Oath.
I was going to say, I knew it. As soon as you said Ken, my
Fenton,
brain went
if you're listening and you want to know why the magpie is called Ken Oath, because the way we say it in Australia, it's fucking oath, mate.
Right, fucking oath.
So we've taken out the FUCK, put in the Ken Oath. I love it.
Yeah,
they're my
Ken Oath is for prestigious occasions and when ladies are present.
Oh
yeah, and if you're bumming a smoke off someone and you say, "Thanks, mate, can I have one for Ron?" and they go, "Who's Ron?" Go later on.
That's right. And if he gives you one, he's a dead set legend.
Dead set legends.
Excellent.
Wow.
Take a good hard long look at yourself in the mirror, mate.
Do you want to dip in the river, Rena?
Yes.
I'll go if Gum go. I'll go if Gum. What is it? I'll go if.
Oh, it's all downhill from here, Pete.
Yeah. We need to sign off before our subscriber count plummets.
Jeez, I didn't know we had one. All right. So look, everyone who joined in tonight, Albaji. I'm so sorry if I've got that wrong, and I can guarantee that I have. If you can give us a simple phonetic pronunciation to the name, it'd be hey.
Bogey.
Yeah, I don't know. Sounds good to me. Tamara, thank you so much. Fenton, everyone who else had joined in tonight, thank you so much. Look, we'll do it again. Unfortunately, we're just about out of August, which we can't do an awful lot about. But next one will be the 4th Is it? It's not September already, is it? On the 4th, it is. My goodness gracious me, that is scary. Listen, if you've got any ideas about what you'd like us to talk about, there are 1,000,001 subjects, and we've covered a lot of them. This is episode 34 about belief and things that you perhaps want to talk about or want to know about. We are open to any ideas. If you've got anything you'd like us to talk about, let us know. You can do that by just sticking a comment in here, or you can check us out on Facebook or on our atheist. Our name of our website, of course, on Facebook is Atheist. What's it called? It's Atheist Believer Pastor, I think it's called, the shortened version of it. But if you just go onto Facebook and put that in, you'll find us. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about. We are more than happy to have a look at it. Thank you so much for your company. Thanks to Suresh, who's gone, and also Rich, who's a big girl's blouse and has to get up early in the morning. But you know.
Ladies handbag.
I got told off last week for saying that about to someone, big girl's blouse. I thought it was very sexist. And I said, it's actually not. It's an English saying which had nothing to do with women, but had to do with the size of a blouse. It wasn't anything to do with the woman. So that's another one for you, Fenton. Stop mucking around. Do your tiling like a big girl's blouse. Get into it and be like a man.
Ladies handbag, fella. Come on. Move it on.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Sorry about the beginnings. Hopefully, I'll get all of my act together tomorrow, technologically wise, for next Wednesday, rather. And hopefully, it'll all come together. So thanks, Luke. Thanks, Jace.
Many thanks, Rowie. Luke just with the lid off. Hooroo.
Hooroo.